Hi, ladies. I'm Fiji Simo, and I'm VP of Product at Facebook, where I lead video. And I'm a co-founder of Women in Product, and I'm so excited to be with you today. I'm also, yes, applause for all of you. I'm also really excited to introduce April Underwood. April is a VP of Product at Slack, and she's worked at Slack since 2015. As a tech veteran, April was actually at Twitter prior to Slack, where she really grew Twitter from a groundbreaking startup all the way to IPO. And then before Twitter, she was also a PM at Travelocity and at Google. So we're really excited to hear what April has to say today about the future of work. Please join me in welcoming April.
Thank you, Fiji. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. It's so exciting to be here. I'm so impressed with the work that Dev and Fiji and the whole team have done here over the last couple of years, bringing this community together. It's amazing to look out into this audience and see so many women. I mean, literally, look at it. Never seen that before. It's awesome. Really in any audience, let alone for product or something related to software development. So this is really exciting to be here today. As Fiji mentioned, I'm the VP of Product at Slack. I'm currently responsible for all aspects of our product development, as well as our user research efforts and our platform. And so I'm actually going to talk a little bit about enterprise software today, if that's all right. How many of you work in enterprise? Okay, I'm curious, how many of you who work in enterprise worked in not enterprise, like consumer, until not too long ago? Okay, there's a few of you. That's interesting because I think that there's a trend there. I do see folks like myself who primarily have had a background in consumer seeing so much opportunity in enterprise right now, and just the whole space is so ripe for better products. So I think that it's a really great time to be doing product in enterprise software development. But before I jump into that, let me tell you a little bit about me. So it was a very kind intro, so you've gotten a little bit of this background already. But I want to share a little bit more color about how I got to the role I'm in today as VP of Product at Slack. So I started my career as an engineer at Intel. I actually don't have a CS degree, but I have an information systems degree. And while I was in college, I actually taught myself to code because I had given up my scholarships to be able to change my major away from chemical engineering once I learned that that would primarily have me in oil refineries. And I just, to be honest, couldn't imagine putting on steel-toed boots and a hard hat every day and working in an oil refinery, so I changed my major and gave up all of my chemical engineering scholarships, much to my parents' horror. So in doing that, I started working in tech support, and this is 1998, and so there were lots of opportunities to help people figure out how to get their dial-up modems working. And it was challenging work. You had to literally explain to somebody how to fix their modem drivers and then hang up the phone with them so that they could try on their phone line and hopefully not call back. So I taught myself to code to get myself out of that job, which was I taught myself HTML over the holiday break, and I started building training modules so that the other 30, 60, over time 100 different support call team members had the scripts in front of them, and I wrote them in Notepad in HTML. So that background was the reason that I was really qualified to be an engineer at Intel. I didn't necessarily have that experience, but I joined Intel as an engineer. I really wanted to be an engineer early in my career because I had a sense that there was a lot I would learn from getting my hands dirty. So I joined Travelocity and then made the transition into product. But a couple things I just want to point out here from a product standpoint. While I was at Travelocity, I wanted to make the transition into product management. And I was told that I probably would need an MBA to do that. So I thought, okay, so I applied to business school. And I got in, and then I was immediately given the opportunity to go ahead and be a PM. So I was a PM, I went to business school, and when I graduated, something had happened, which was I was then told you needed to have a CS degree 5 years ago when you graduated from undergraduate to be able to be a PM at Google. And so that was really surprising to me, but I think that it's an important thing to know, which is that we've all chosen a field that is very, very much always changing. Product management is not the same between one company and the next, and it's not the same from 1 year or 1 decade to the next. And I would say that, I've seen that over the last 15 or so years that I've been doing this at places like Climate Corp, Twitter, and now at Slack. And I think it's one thing that's important to know, which is that we are all embracing a profession that is constantly changing. So in doing that, I think that I'm going to share some insights a little bit later on as to how I've navigated that, and I think it's an important thing to embrace, which is that I would challenge you not to be told you need to do X to be able to be a product manager, you need to have Y, because frankly, just look a couple years forward or backward and you will find that actually the story is quite different. So I think of my career a little bit like crossing a stream. You need to find a steady place to land, but you can't necessarily determine exactly what the path will be in advance. You need to get from one step to the next, and sometimes you go off to the side a bit. I've led business development teams. I've led marketing teams. As you know, I've been an engineer, so it has not been a straightforward path from sort of like APM to PM1 to PM2 to senior PM. It hasn't looked like that. In fact, it's been much more winding. And I think that's part of actually what I bring to my roles, and I would actually really encourage everybody to look for those adjacent opportunities, as well as look for the way to sort of find one step forward that leads you in the general direction of where you're going, even if it doesn't necessarily seem to be the most obvious, straightforward path to get there. So now I'm going to talk about enterprise software. So it's such a great time to be talking to you all because we had our first conference last week at Slack. I don't know if any of you got to join us. All right, yes. Veronica, hi, how are you doing? Good to see you. So we had a really great first conference for Slack up in San Francisco last week. And in doing that, we talked a lot about the future of work. And so when we think about the future of work, we have this firm belief that companies are not only in a state of evolution as to how they want to work, but also that there's a set of trends, macro trends, that are really contributing to why there's a real opportunity for a company like Slack today. And I'm going to reveal them to you in just one moment when the slides are back. But in doing so, I think that one of the things that I want to make sure is that I want to convey is that product management is incredibly interdisciplinary. And so when we think about the opportunity for Slack, we look at these trends right now. So probably many of you are messaging right now in some way. You're texting, you're maybe on Twitter, Facebook Messenger, but we rely on messaging as the primary way that we communicate in our personal lives today. It just makes sense. I think there's a whole generation of people that don't spend a lot of time in email, that wouldn't know what to do with too much email. And so it makes sense that in our work lives, we should be able to communicate the same way that we've become accustomed to in our personal lives. But there's another trend too, and hopefully this represents many of you in the audience, which is that companies are finding that there's a real appetite for better tools at work, better software in the workplace. You think about the dichotomy between software for consumer and software at work. For consumer, we have to do the work to teach people how to use the software while they're using it. You don't typically train somebody how to use a consumer app. But in the workplace, it's still often the case that when you start using new software, you actually go to a training session. It's just a huge gap in usability and in the approach to building software. And so there are so many amazing companies, including Veronica's company, Growbot, that are building software for teams at work. And in doing so, what we're finding is that companies are licensing dozens or hundreds, even thousands of cloud applications. So these applications, they're great. They're better quality. Teams are really thinking about the user experience and really making software that people want to use, but none of it talks to each other. So finally, there's a cultural transformation that I see happening when I talk to our customers at Slack, which is that communication used to really flow through org chart lines. You think about the typical cascade. Something starts at the top of the org chart and it gets tailored as it goes to the organization. And you really look to the org chart to determine who should know what. But most companies are finding that there's so much value in a communication and a collaboration style within their organization that looks a lot more like, kind of like a little network inside of a company. And that network really means the ability to organize communication and workflows around shared purpose, shared goals. And I think for PMs, this is probably very intuitive. PMs have to work with people across the entire organization. And the truth is that the tools that we've had in the past have just been so woefully unfit for this way of working. And that's why we all have to spend, if you work in an email culture, you have to spend hours every day literally triaging a time-sorted list of messages with no clear indication as to what they're about. And you have to do the work to find out whether or not there's anything actionable in there for you. And you have to actually triage all of them and basically, clear out your inbox every night. So Slack is obviously a fundamentally different model. It's organized around topics and channels. It allows teams to be able to build constraints and ways that they work within their organization that are totally tailored and adaptable over time. So this is a bit of the background as to the trends that we see, but we also are highly motivated at Slack to build something people love. So we take this really seriously. We sweat the details. And in doing so, we're really trying to, we believe we have this huge opportunity to help companies work together better. But in doing so, we also really want to build it for the end users, which is somewhat radical from an enterprise software standpoint, although a view that's shared by plenty of other companies that are joining the charge today. So I'm going to talk today about building enterprise software that people actually want to use. And I say that maybe people even grow to love because we talk about the word love a lot at Slack, believe it or not. If you walk into our office, we have what we call love tweets, which is screens that show some of the tweets that people have tweeted about Slack, oftentimes including things like marriage proposals to us or to our software, which is cool. So we also read the bad ones, and I'll talk about that too. But I think that this is a high aspiration for us. It's not it's not something sort of that we say that we care about. We actually really truly build Slack for the end users that are sitting in front of their desks trying to get work done. So our approach in doing this, it really entails a few different things. One is that if you looked at the makeup of our team and how we operate, we adopt a lot of consumer product mindset, but we marry that with an enterprise software business model. So unlike in consumer, where you're oftentimes building a great experience that engages users, but your business is supported by advertisers who you also need to serve, we have the opportunity to really focus on one single audience, which is people in the workplace. Secondly, we have a really rapidly evolving ecosystem from the over 1,000 apps we have in the Slack app directory to all of the different, just elements as to how our customers are faced with decisions about the tools that they use. We've got new competitors coming on the market all the time right now. And then we certainly have a wide variety of applications that our customers like to use in concert with Slack. So there's a lot of complexity in that ecosystem for us to keep an eye on and help foster. Because we believe that more software choices, I should say, is really a great thing for our customers. And then finally, the truth is that there still are decisions to be made within most companies of any meaningful size. So above 10, 20 people, somebody's going to make the decision about whether they're going to use Slack or whether they're going to use any of the products that many of you are building in the audience. So I would encourage you all to think about empathy for that decision maker, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. So, if you believe that enterprises are made of humans, which we do, these are some of the things that we do to really think about those end users when we develop Slack. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, love tweets. Well, there's a converse to that, which is, we sometimes jokingly say, don't read the comments on the internet, and there's plenty of bad stuff in the comments. But when it comes to comments about your feedback, or tweets, or customer support tickets, one of the most valuable things any PM at any level can do is read those him or herself. I think that, oftentimes, especially in larger organizations, sometimes that gets watered down. It gets kind of synthesized by a support team, and that's really valuable work that those teams are doing. But there's no substitute for just reading the raw feedback from your users. The trick is not to let it eat you alive. I worked on Twitter for 5 years. If you've ever been on Twitter, there are people on Twitter who have opinions about Twitter. If you were to take all of that to heart, you would have a constantly endless, conflicting list of feature requests from your customers that would leave you confused about which audience you were serving and what was most important. So you have to have your own conviction to anchor you as to the vision that you're working towards. But I do think that it's important for you to read the comments. Secondly, find the internal users who best represent your audience. Now, working at Slack, we all use Slack all day. It's actually very meta. So we believe in this future of work, we're trying to build it, but we're doing it while working in the future of work. And so in doing that, we can get a little bit, we can kind of like almost trip over ourselves sometimes when we think about, how could we be doing this better? We're very introspective around our process and looking backward at how we could have delivered a product to a higher quality, how we could have done it faster. In doing so, we sometimes looked at our own use of Slack and the tools that we use as to how we could potentially be building an environment where we can do our best work more easily. So within Slack, 100% of employees use Slack all day. It's a huge gift. It's actually interesting. I've discovered that I've been starting to really internalize the value of that by seeing features that may not be used by us at Slack because of our size or because of our cultural orientation towards openness, for example, and discovering those features I don't think are quite as polished as the ones that we use every day, which is a really valuable insight that there's just no substitute for using your product yourself. But if you're an engineer and you're building accounting software, what do you do? If you're a product manager and you're building HR software but you don't sit in the HR team, how do you develop that empathy? And what I would encourage is I would actually think about elevating those internal users who best represent your audience and maybe even have the product folks sit near them. Spend time with them, really treat them like your own internal customer advisory board and hire the very, very best people that you can for that function within your company because they are going to be the strongest voice, the shortest distance from you being able to get feedback to actually implement it. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities for you to be able to get more benefit from those internal teams. So user research, analytics, sales, support teams, all of these amazing teams that sit around product development teams, they're hugely valuable tools, but it's important to understand how to use them. There's a lot of talk right now about things like data-driven product development. And what I so often see is it gets elevated to sort of this conversation around philosophy quite quickly, where you're either a data-driven company or you're like living in the past or something like that. And I think the reality is data can be a very, very valuable tool, but so can user research, so can talking to your customers. Much like you need to be thoughtful when you're hiring somebody about exactly what's most important for that role, when you sit down to develop a new feature or build a new product, I would encourage you to think about which of these tools is most important for the stage that you're in and ensure that that voice gets elevated to be the loudest, that has the most influence, and that you incorporate the other voices, but you do so with discretion. And you can always tune the relative value of those tools over time. But you gotta have a plan coming in, because I think otherwise it can get very confusing when you have a lot of different voices sort of potentially drawing you in different directions or even drawing your team into just a state of confusion as to what's important. And then finally, particularly for enterprise software, and I think this one's important for people who make the transition from consumer to enterprise, but you might work on consumer software and never really meet a customer. I mean, except for like your friends and your family who maybe use your product and tell you about it over dinner. In enterprise, it's incredibly important for you to be able to represent your product, for you to be able to really glean insights from conversations with customers, and ultimately to have some selling ability. And I think for folks who've been in enterprise for quite some time, this is probably no surprise. which to me only speaks back to what I mentioned at the beginning, which is that product management is a function, it's a role that is very, very different from company to company. So I think that for folks that are relatively new to enterprise software, I strongly recommend that you spend a lot of time with the sales team and see what you can learn on the job and see how well you can actually sell the product yourself, because you will find yourself in a situation where you need to do so. So we're in this, what we consider a golden age for enterprise software. So there's demand from consumers for better enterprise software tools. It's never been cheaper than ever before to build something. You can use AWS or Google Cloud or any of the other cloud services, and you can build a service and get it up and running. Customers have an appetite for cloud software. Some of the risk concerns have mitigated over the last decade or so, thanks to companies like Salesforce that have paved the way. And so right now there really is this moment where there's a real opportunity not only to build better tools for customers, people in the workplace, but to also get them in front of those customers through places like the Slack app directory. So in doing so, I would love to see more people in this audience start companies building for some of the millions of problems that exist in the workplace every single day. But in doing so, I'd say enterprise software is definitely has some very regimented aspects to it. There are quadrants, there are categories, they're very predefined, and you oftentimes find yourself sort of being put into some box. And so I would encourage you, and one of the things we try to do is we try to be brave enough not to let pre-existing categories define us. I think that's really, really critical to be able to build things that are truly novel. And it's scary because you have to come up with the words to explain it yourself when you can't say it's Uber for X or it's Y for Z. But I do think I think that is where a lot of the opportunity exists and where really great product innovations can come through. I oftentimes see companies that have a very specific idea they're excited about. Perhaps they want to make expense reporting easier. But I typically encourage them, and we have a Slack fund where we've actually funded about a couple dozen companies thus far building new applications for teams at work. I really encourage them to look to the bigger problem. So that oftentimes means looking further up the organizational chart within a company and really identifying the core of the problems that matter to the senior leaders within an organization. You may start small, you may be able to build something that's only a few features that actually provide some value in the near term, but to build a true business that is going to be really meaningful, you need to be aiming for a bigger problem. At Slack, our mission is to make people's working lives simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. So I think we have at least a few decades of work in service of that mission. And so I think looking for those more aspirational missions that are more broad sweeping will help your team be able to explore the problem space and create a bigger opportunity over time. And then finally, no software tool at work these days really gets used in a vacuum. So being aware of and spending time with your customers to understand how they get their work done and all of the different pieces that fit together will help you unearth partnership opportunities, will help you take advantage of different distribution channels, whether those are online like the Slack app directory or whether they're through channel partners or ISVs. So understanding that ecosystem of tools from start to finish is really critical. So the final note. So it's tough being a decision maker in general. How many would you all agree? You make decisions all day. It's not so easy. You have a lot of things coming at you. So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that our IT customers, these are IT admins or CIOs, are just, they're inundated with requests. I get them myself, so this has been more the case for me at Slack than anywhere else, but my inbox is literally full every day. It's almost the only email that I get from companies that are seeking to sell us software. Some of them are really good and catchy and know that I eat gluten-free and that I'm pregnant, and it's impressive, and I typically refer them to our sales recruiting team for being so cunning. But I think that you just, being aware that every one of those decision makers have so many different things that are coming at them. So one of the best things that you can do is turn those decision makers into users. So, for example, we just announced a partnership with ServiceNow last week. And ServiceNow is an amazing company, and they actually have a product that really works across many categories. But they have a particular stronghold with IT teams. IT teams are the teams that are ultimately responsible for making the decision as to whether and how to roll out Slack within companies. So for quite some time, we've heard that this was something that our customers wanted. They wanted to see Slack and ServiceNow work together, but we hadn't done it yet. And we finally realized that it's incredibly important for these decision makers, gatekeepers to some extent, to actually really have their own reason that they want to use our product. And so we're super excited to announce a partnership like that. And I think that thinking about the combination of partnerships as well as product features that can serve the audience of decision makers and turn them from sort of gatekeepers to hopefully evangelists is one of the fastest ways that you can accelerate growth of your product. So another aspect of Slack that's been really phenomenal is just to see how passionate some of our users are. They go to great lengths to teach the other team members how to use Slack. And maybe you've seen that, those of you that use Slack, maybe you see this in your organization. There are people that we're so grateful, pay attention to every feature that we launch, and they go and they teach the rest of their team as to how to use it, which is just really, really amazing. So I think a lot about what can we do to identify those power users within a team, and what can we do to basically feed them the information that they need to be able to help their team get the most out of our product. And then a little tongue-in-cheek, but true. Sometimes as a product manager or a leader, you find that you only really get to spend time with customers when things go wrong. And it's very, very hard to be influential and to help make things right when you're starting from a very, very limited foundation of understanding of your customer. So spend time with customers before they get angry, is a small bit of advice. So the role of a PM. This is a chameleon. And a rather pretty one, I think. I think that it's, I think that as I've spent a lot of time with, engineers when I used to be PMing features myself, and, sometimes there's jokes about product managers, right? Yeah. Maybe we're bringing process in, maybe we're a little Dilberty. Maybe we are a little bit of, two-faced in a way. We can sort of like be in one room and tell the engineers one thing and then go tell another room of people something else. We've been accused of all of these things, right? It is part of the job, and I'd actually encourage you to embrace all of it. So first of all, in a world in which we are communicating in a different way, like I've described and like many of us are doing in Slack, brevity is crucial. It's absolutely crucial, and this is one of the things that I see that particularly more up-and-coming junior PMs, oftentimes I think we feel the need to express ourselves at length to show that we've been really thorough in our thought process, and it turns out a one-liner that really gives very little justification and just gets straight to the point can be a much more effective way of communicating. So I like this personality. There's a personality test where you actually assess how you like people to engage with you that is used within Zillow Group, where I'm on the board. And the exec team, and I suspect if I took it as well, fall into the category of be brief, be bright, be gone, which sounds a little cold, but at the same time, I think that it's important to understand within your company, whether it's your boss, your executive team, but also even with senior customer contacts as well, that brevity is just absolutely crucial, and there's so much you can say with very, very little, and actually you oftentimes need to explain yourself a lot less than you suspect. It can be surprising just to state something confidently and then find there are no follow-up questions. Saved yourself a lot of time. So this is the template we used for a product one-pager at Slack. We started using it on ads at Twitter a while ago, so it's very, very simple. It's a one-page document. There are no wireframes. It is just text, and it answers, why should we build this? And it's actually why now. For whom? Who's the audience? What is it? And this is where it should start to get very, very high level. And when you get to how, you should recognize that that's really the space that you're leaving for your engineering and design partners to be able to really answer that question with solutions. But the opportunity to just lay out in the simplest form possible what a feature or a product is, its essence, and why it should be built in these simple ways is really, really powerful. They're great too because you can read them in about 2 minutes, which means that you can actually encourage your team to have more cross-team communication because we all have time to read something that takes about 2 minutes. But at Slack, I've added a couple of things because we care so deeply about craftsmanship in building a product that people love. We've added, where is the magic? So thinking very, very early on, is there something that we can do to make this experience just a bit more delightful? And then almost conversely, although they're not actually at odds with each other, is there a cheat code? Is there some way to achieve everything that is desired and laid out in the questions above with something actually really quite simple? It could be a policy solution, it could be a marketing campaign, it could be a minor tweak to the copy and the product. Is there some way to actually get 80% of the value with 10 or 20% of the work? And so this is the template that we use at Slack for features, and we found it really, really effective, and we've got a team of about 22 right now, and we try to do a lot of peer review at this level, because this is a level at which you actually are really, and it's at a stage at which you're really open to a lot of feedback. And as you get deeper and deeper into the process, then having 21 other people give you feedback on your product feature gets less and less desirable. So, and then finally, I just want to encourage you all to get really comfortable just saying, I don't know. I don't have that with me right now. It's not so bad. If you say it confidently, without defensiveness, without any tinge of shame, actually, it can be very, very powerful. Because much like I mentioned earlier with brevity, I think that a lot of times questions or issues get brought up that really aren't that important. And if you chase those things in a desire to be right, to be able to show that you've done that you've done your work, that you've sort of convinced everybody around the table what you know, you can spend a lot of time chasing your tail. So I strongly encourage, and I've found in my own progression that it can be really, really powerful to just say I don't know, and I'm surprised how often the question just doesn't come back again. So, I am so excited to be here today. It is a real delight to be here in this audience, and I am just so looking forward to hearing from all of the other speakers today as well. I expect to learn as much or probably quite a bit more than I've shared. So I encourage you all to get to know one another and enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you so much for having me. And I'll admit, I don't know exactly how much time we have for questions, but I bet that clock means we have 4 minutes and 55 seconds. So if you have questions, I believe we have a runner right here. And I am happy to answer any questions, even beyond enterprise software.
Do you use that template that you showed earlier just for new product or features as well?
For features. Yeah, for product features. Yeah, I'll repeat the question for those of you who couldn't hear it. It's a question I get a lot, and I love it. So we get asked about our release notes in the iOS and Android app stores. We put a lot of care and attention into them. So the short answer is that voice originally comes from a couple human beings, real live ones. I am lucky enough to get to work with them. It's in part our CEO and founder, Stuart Butterfield, my boss. It's also in part Anna Picard, who has for a long time been part of our editorial and really was our editorial team for a long time, and of course now it's a larger team. And one of the things to note is that we really have scaled that voice. So if you follow us on Twitter, you know that we respond to every single tweet. And we do so sometimes if people make a movie reference to us in their tweet at us, we go find the right movie reference and respond with it. So like we really put a lot of care and attention into it. It's pretty amazing. And so in doing that, I give a lot of credit to our support team, which has really done a lot of training and does things like when you first join our support team, if you're going to be a tweeter, if you're going to be one of the people responding on Twitter, you actually are in a channel where you're getting feedback on your proposed responses for some amount of time until you've kind of like you've hit the voice, the nail on the head. But the release notes are very, very handcrafted, but still by a small number of people that we are lucky have really been with us since the start. Yes. I can't almost. Sure. Yeah.
You might say, I don't know, but then it looks bad that you don't know something that maybe they expect you to know.
That's a great question. Have I ever been asked any questions that are ridiculous? Yes. But I love that. It's a really good question. So I think you have to understand the dynamics of the room. And so part of it is how well do you know the people in the room? Sure, there's leveling, and if you were asked a question by somebody who's much more senior than you, then obviously you don't want to, you're probably more keen not to come across as flippant or something like that, which I think is kind of what you're getting at with I don't know. But what I have found is that if you can kind of muster your inner confidence, and in doing so, you can say, that's an interesting question. I hadn't expected that to come up. How important do you think this is? And I think you have to be careful about how your tone, and we maybe have to be more careful than other people, to be honest. But I do think that there's a way where you can indicate, you can give some visibility into the fact that perhaps this question isn't the most important thing right now. That you're happy to go look into it, but we've got a number of other things that we want to make sure we get through in this meeting. And so I do think that there is a way for you to still say, I don't know that, but if this is something that's really important, I'm sure we can follow up with it afterward. I think maintaining cool, and particularly when you're sort of under fire or being put on the spot, is the body language conveys just as much as the words. And so I think trying to maintain just an even keel can go a really long way. Yeah, I think we're out of time. I don't know why I had that feeling. Awesome. Okay, well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.